All right, hello everyone. It's been a little while. I haven't gotten back to the videos, but today we're gonna start. We're gonna pick it up in Revelation chapter 8, and we're just gonna talk about Revelation chapter 8. I don't know if we'll get to chapter 9. There's a lot in Revelation chapter 8, so we'll start with verse 1 and 2, and then we're gonna do an explanation on it a little bit.
And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was a silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw the seven angels which stood before God, and to them were given seven trumpets.
Okay, so basically it says that there was a silence. This wasn't a loud trumpet or whatever. It was silent. In other words, there was a period of time of in a half an hour. In prophetic time is a week. So a week of silence. There's basically nothing happening. So it was like a break from all the judgment at the time. So that's basically what it was saying. And then we're gonna open the next judgments. We're about to come shortly after, and we'll explain them. I believe that would be the first trumpet, and we'll explain what the first trumpet is.
And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and were given unto him much incense. He should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came from the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. All right. This tells us something very important. It reveals us something very important. It's talking about a smoke and incense, which is a prayer of the saints, which means that the saints not all the saints, which it mentioned, could not possibly be in heaven before the throne. When we're reading about the language, where it says these prayers ascended to the throne of God.
Ascended. So if they're already in heaven, the prayers of the saints would have to descend down, right? And then what are they praying about? If they're in heaven, what are they praying about? What are the saints praying about? You know, if there's the tribulation and all this stuff that's going on, and the persecution's all going on, but they're in heaven. It really doesn't make much sense to have a futuristic approach here. It makes a lot more sense that this is an ongoing thing. That the prayers of the saints are ascending into heaven, and then God now thunders down and deals with it and acts. And the prayers are heard, the saints, which a lot of the prayers are about related to obviously impending martyrdom, extreme persecution, and all that. And that's happening today. There are Christians all over the world who are experiencing it today. So that incense is still ascending into heaven. So it speaks of past events, but it's also ongoing. So that aspect of it is still ongoing. So it's not all past here. So that's an example of a situation where it clearly shows that the historicist view isn't that great to have fully, and it also clearly shows that the futurist interpretation isn't correct either. So let's just let the book of Revelation speak and say what it says. And we should take all our religious precondestined notions and set them aside for the time being, and let's just see what the book of Revelation is telling us, and then see the language that it's using, and then we can understand by the language it's using and the explanations and prophetic time to understand what we're dealing with here. So let's continue on.
So when we read the scriptures, we want to be very cautious and careful in looking at this being very specific, being very exact, because it talked about all the saints and were offering prayers to God. Talked about the incense was the prayer of all the saints, which means that it rules out the possibility that there were some up in heaven and some down on earth. So it rules out that possibility. When you hear languages like all or ascending, so when it's talking to something that's ascending, it's not descending. So it's very important to keep that in mind when we read the scriptures. Also, as my brother pointed out, there are prophecies and things being spoken of all over Revelation that were started in the past, and they were ongoing, and they're still ongoing, even to present times. So we want to keep that in mind as we continue to read the book. So I will continue in verse 5. And the angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar and cast it unto the earth. And there was voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the 7 angels, which had the 7 trumpets, prepared themselves to sound.
Okay, so this was God's response to the prayers of the saints. So when the prayers of the saints happen and the incense comes up to heaven, God acts. And when this is talking about God's presence and God's power, the thunderings and the lightning. So this always happens when God is about to do something. When he delivered the 10 Commandments to Moses, and so the same language, thunderings and lightnings, are used. So there's no reason to believe that it's talking about something completely different. So, and that says they're about to open all the trumpets now. All the 7 angels of the 7 trumpets are ready to sound their trumpets. So now the judgments are going to happen very soon. Now, these trumpets are basically all have occurred. All of these 7 trumpets have already occurred. Okay, so they have a historical point. But that being said, again, there are some of these things are ongoing, so it's not like they're all finished, and they don't shadow future events at all. So let me be clear about that. But at the same time, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you that these trumpets, they have prophetic time. Most of these have prophetic time put with them. So you can't say it's 7 years and all these things can happen. It doesn't make any sense. And it also doesn't make any sense that the church is gone in all raptured in heaven either. And then none of these things, it doesn't make any sense. We're going to see how Revelation 8 all the way to 11, actually all the way to 13 at the moment, doesn't make any sense with a raptured church and no church members on earth or no saints on earth at this time of these events. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. So the futurist attempt, we will see the futurist idea doesn't work very well here as we go forward. But at the same time, let me be clear, the historicist view isn't correct either fully, because it's saying that all these events have happened totally, and then there's nothing else going on in the future, which is not true. So these shadow events, the book of Revelation constantly, takes past events, uses those past events to foreshadow future events. Okay? So we got to keep that in mind as well. All right, when we read it. We'll continue.
And it also backs up the prophetic language and the descriptions that were used by the early prophets that came before. Prophets like Daniel and Jeremiah and Ezekiel. They use similar language to describe similar events, past, present, and future. So we want to keep that in mind also. And the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees were burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up.
So shortly after, this first trumpet, the first couple trumpets, basically speaking of Rome, and pardon me, it was talking about Rome, and the judgments were happening to the Roman Empire, because this was the empire that ruled during the time of John the Apostle. And it says in the first chapter that these things would shortly come to pass. So a lot of these events were very clearly were going to happen fairly soon after John wrote these things. And so this is a perfect example. this is speaking of the Gothic invasions of in the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire was sort of getting weaker because of all the previous other judgments. The seals, it really did a lot of damage to the Roman Empire in many ways. It split it up to west and east. It was getting weaker. It hadn't fully been weakened to that point, but the Western Roman part, we're talking, was severely weakened by this Gothic invasion. And they were said to have burned a lot of the vegetation, and they did a lot of that kind of thing. So that's what it's talking about. Now we're going to go to the next trumpet.
And the second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships was destroyed.
Okay, so we don't take this in a literal sense. Like it's like this big mountain was thrown in the sea and literally kills all these sea creatures and everything. Because it talks about ships. So it's like, we're not talking about a big meteor or something hitting the earth and taking out some ships and killing a lot of people, like a third part of the people in the area. It doesn't make any. It's not literal, guys. It's not literal. Okay, so this is a figurative thing. I mean, allegorical, and it's an analogy, and it's allegorical here. That's how the only way you can interpret this. And basically, what it clearly shows is, okay, so we take the Gothic invasion, but the Vandal invasion, the invasion of the Vandals, which were actually basically Carthage reborn, and they were seafaring, and they basically, what they did was they destroyed the Roman navy in a series of battles, and that's what it means by creatures. The creatures are speaking of people, and so they really, really destroyed and decimated Rome's entire navy. So that's basically what that trumpet's about. So this is actually talking about a real event, the Vandals' invasion and the destruction of the Roman navy. And after that, the Roman Empire never recovered. They're no longer a naval superpower after this point. So this trumpet was very damaging to the Roman Empire.
And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning in it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star was called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter.
And now, this is this great wormwood. It's not talking about literally a star, like a star falling in the waters and polluting the waters and people dying from it. It doesn't. It's not literal. Again, this is not literal. It's talking about another trumpet, a person, and this person is Attila the Hun. And I'll tell you why. Because Attila the Hun, when he invaded the Roman Empire, he attacked them in a series of battles on rivers. And these are the major rivers in Italy, like the River Po, and I can't remember the River Tiber, and there's another river. But 3 river battles that Attila had with the Romans. And there was such a great slaughter that the historians of the time said that the rivers literally were ran with blood. And that because the rivers ran with blood, obviously they would have been bitter, and you couldn't drink out of waters that were polluted by dead bodies in blood. And of course, it caused people to be sick too. Like it caused serious issues and problems and sickness as a result. So that's what it was talking about. And obviously, in Attila the Hun, it was a pretty good description of what Attila the Hun did. So this is the third trumpet.
And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and it was darkened, and the day shone not for the third part of it, and the night likewise. Behold, I heard an angel flying to the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, 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 to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels, which are yet to sound.
So 3 woes. It says woe, 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 3 woes. So now it's talking about the next trumpet, and they're the woes. Okay, the third woe, I believe, what I understand the third woe to be is actually Armageddon. But I'm not 100, but I'm not going. That's just my take. But but very clearly we can see that the first and second woes are those remaining trumpets. Okay, it actually spells it out. It says this is the first woe is past. So we can't just choose to say that it's World War I or it's this, that, or something else in the future. It says it's this trumpet. So either this trumpet's in the future or it already has occurred. And if it has, then we know that's the first woe. So we can't say the first woe is something else because it clearly states that it isn't. And so we need to let the book of Revelation speak for itself. And this trumpet that I was talking about was actually the final invasion of Rome, where he sacked Rome. And that's because that's what it's talking about, the clouds and the things shaking in the moon dark. And that this is the language, talks about major upheaval. Well, it was because the Western Roman Empire was no more. And that's what this was talking about. This huge upheaval where the barbarians had finally pillaged and sacked Rome. And this was, this is what this trumpet's all about. And then it says, woe, woe, woe. In other words, 3 woes to come after this trumpet. So this concludes this chapter. And so we're going to take it up. We're going to start the next chapter, Revelation chapter 9.
And the 5th angel sounded, and a star fell from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened up the bottomless pit, and there rose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth. Unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power.
So let's explain this. Let's unpack this here. There's a lot here, but it makes it clear it clearly identifies where this comes from. Let's say it comes straight from hell, the pits of hell, the bottomless pit. The angel opens it up, and this is what creates the dark ages. Because it's talking about a darkness, and a great darkness fell upon the entire earth because the devil now was allowed to open up something. And this it talks about where it came from. Where is the source? It says locusts upon the earth, like locusts upon the earth. Now, locusts speak of a desert region, but specifically Arabia. And it talks about locusts of the earth. They're invading Israel as a locust of the earth. And it's talking about the Midianite invasion. And this is an Old Testament reference to using the same language. And so it uses the word scorpions. Well, scorpions don't live in non-arid regions of the world. So it's making clear that this trumpet and this judgment and this woe, which is we're talking about, is going to come from a place in the desert. And Midian was an area, they found out, and they did further studies. Midian was in Arabia, actually. So what they realized, they used Midian, they used locusts of the earth to describe the Midianite invasion. So how would it be any different using the same thing to talk about an Arabic invasion? An Arabic invasion, which was the Arabs, which became what we know as the Muslims or the Islamic conquest. And this is where it started. And this is what this first woe is all about, because it's talking about locusts of the earth and scorpions. And it says, and then they were given power. And the source is from the bottomless pit. And that's why we're talking about the darkness. So this is where we're talking the dark ages, because the light of the Roman Empire had been blown out. And now we're in total darkness. And this is what we're talking about here. Let's continue.
And it was commanded them, they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but they should torment them 5 months. And the torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man.
All right, let's get to this. Okay, so now it has a biblical time given that they're going to torment those that do not have the seal of God upon their foreheads. In other words, we're talking about the apostate church, okay? The ones that were not Jesus' church. And it said that they would torment them. And that's exactly what they did. When the Muslims invaded North Africa and the Middle East, they quickly took over the whole area. And all those apostate Christians either became Islamic or they fled or they were killed. So this is what it's talking about, okay, clearly. And how we know clearly is because the Muslim armies never burnt anything. This is a very important thing to talk about. So Muhammad and the Prophet and the Quran and the Islamic text and the Muslim invaders and army never ever burnt vegetation. It was against their belief system to do so. And so that's why it's a very clear indicator. So we have the locusts on the earth and the scorpions, and now we have another thing that reveals who we're talking about here. We're talking about the Muslim invaders because we're talking about something that they would never do. They did not burn the vegetation because that was against their their belief system. Very important to mention. Let's continue to the next part here.
Before we move on, I want to make a point here. Talked about having a mark on their foreheads. It's referring to the mark of the beast.
Well, no, the seal of God of the foreheads is the church.
So the seal on the forehead means they're God's chosen church, the church. But the other mark that you could receive at a time was the mark of the beast. So it's saying people who did not have the mark of the beast. So it's already being mentioned here about the marks on their foreheads being either sealed or marked. So obviously, this is not something that we are waiting for to happen in the future. It's talking about people being sealed and marked. Very important to keep in mind as we move forward. All right. And in those days shall men seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, but death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses, prepared unto battle. On their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces as the faces of men. And they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots, of many horses running into battle.
All right, this describes an Islamic army perfectly. And I'll tell you why. Okay, so now, if you were going to describe a futuristic army, would horses be a very good description? I don't think so. You wouldn't talk about breastplates of iron. Breastplates of iron. So it was worn over your chest area. And it was iron, which was chainmail actually. And the Muslim armies they had chainmail already of iron when they went into battle. And they were very famous for doing cavalry charges with horses. And they had curved swords. And they were known to be very fierce in battle, like it says, teeth of lions. And they had long hair and beards. So they had long hair and they had beards. That's and they was talking about. Then they had a helmet of gold. A lot of them had these helmets that was shone brightly, and that's actually exactly what they had at the time. So it clearly describes what an Islamic army would look like in that time frame. So John was seeing this, and this is why he was describing it this way. And so I'm not saying it could not possibly shadow a futuristic army, but this one is very descriptive of an Islamic army and what it would have looked like. So I think that's very interesting. So we'll continue.
And they had tails like unto scorpions, and were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. And they had a king over them, which is in the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue with his name Apollyon. One woe is past, and behold, there come 2 woes more hereafter. Okay, so
So it's saying, clearly saying, this is the first woe. Okay, and it's saying again, it makes another thing that kind of identifies it as being an Islamic army. It's talking about where are we here? Just hang on here. I gotta find this where I am here. Let's see, where are we here? Yeah, it's talking about Abaddon, the bottomless pit. Oh, the scorpions and their tails. We're talking about like siege weapons. They use siege weapons, and it would have looked like the thing that kills men. It would have looked like a tail, like a scorpion tail, and then it would shoot something out, and it would kill people, like fire, and it looked like it was on fire. And explaining siege weapons to the T. It explains the kind of siege weapons that the Islamic armies were using on their enemies. And so that's another description of something that doesn't really, it's not a good description of really futuristic weapons. We're talking about something not as futuristic here. So that was something to say as well. And we're going to continue on. And oh yeah, lastly, to conclude, we're not quite done this chapter, but for the most part we are. But we're running out of time here. I would like to say that again, it says 5 months. And 5 months in biblical time, as we have to be consistent, is 150 years. And if you look at the Islamic invasion from around 570 and you add 150 years, it takes you to about 732. And so by the time 730s, 740s rolled along, they had conquered a lot of lands that belonged to the Eastern Roman Empire, which were basically Christianity started. And it was a judgment against the apostate Christians. And so that's what it was talking about here. So it's talking about that kind of power that they had was out of their mouths. It was talking about siege weapons. And then again, verse 20 and 21, it says, the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues did not repent. Okay. And that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and wood, which neither can see nor hear nor talk. Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. So, I mean, if this is a futuristic church that is already raptured in heaven, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. So this is a problem for a futuristic interpretation here, because it says repented. They did not repent of their works, and so in other words, there was more judgment to come. And again, it was very clearly shows Islamic army invasions. So that's all the time we have to. And I think that should cover chapters 8 and 9. So God bless you, everyone. Take care.